Hello, my name is Austin Habish, the founder of Think Catholic, and you're listening to the Summa podcast, where we study St. Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologiae in a way simple and insightful for anyone to understand. The Summa podcast is brought to you by Think Catholic. Taking 2 questions of the Summa a day, we'll seek to summarize St. Thomas's responses, discovering the brilliance of Aquinas. And his Catholic faith is day 109. So let's get started. We're covering today questions 96 and 97 of the Prima Secundae, that is, of the power of human law and of change in laws. The translation that I always use in these podcasts is the one generously provided to me by Ave Maria Press, the 5-volume set translated by the Fathers of the English Dominican province, which you can now get at a discounted price from Ave Maria Press's site by typing in the code Summa 10. And so here we go. Article 1, whether human law should be framed for the community rather than for the individual. Should laws be created to suit the individual or as generally and broadly suitable to the entire community? And the answer is pretty clear. Because law is created for the common good or the good of all, it must be framed for the sake of all, or taking into account, broadly speaking, the condition of all, and be framed in such a way that it works not only for this or that person, but for the whole society. Moreover, laws must endure over time, and so also in this way must be applicable not only to different people, but across various times. As an example for this article, when constructing the laws for how to cross the street, the law for the common good must be a law which leads everyone to safety, even if some individuals may think that this law is unnecessary to them personally as individuals, yet for the common good it makes sense that it would be binding on all. And I mean, how would the state even go about deciding, if it didn't apply to all, who it applied to and who was excused from it? Therefore, we just get the general law that all must use them. This human law is framed for the community as opposed to the individual. Article 2, whether it belongs to the human law to repress all vices. If it did, it would either be held in contempt by being unable to subsequently enforce certain laws, or wicked men might simply rise up against the state in revolution because of those laws. Imagine a society forbidding by law gluttony, or lying, or gossip, or any of these things which the virtuous do not do, and one should not do, but simply could not be enforced by civil law. Aquinas says here, human law is framed for a number of human beings, the majority of whom are not perfect in virtue. Wherefore, human laws do not forbid all vices from which the virtuous abstain, but only the more grievous vices from which it is possible for the majority to abstain from, and chiefly those that are to the hurt of others, without the prohibition of which human society could not be maintained. Thus, human law prohibits murder, theft, and such like. Article 3, whether human law prescribes acts of all the virtues. Human law, which is directed towards the common good, may not prescribe all acts of virtue, but it definitely requires some, such as honesty in a court of law, or discretion, secrecy if one is given sensitive state-related information. It may even direct certain citizens to the defense of other citizens, whether that be domestic criminals or against foreign armies, which would then require of its citizens acts of courage. Therefore, human law can prescribe or demand certain virtues in particular circumstances, or certain virtues from specific people, but it does not prescribe all acts of virtue for all people. Article 4, whether human law binds a man in conscience. And a word from St. Thomas, laws framed by man are either just or unjust. If they be just, they have the power of binding in conscience for the eternal law whence they are derived. According to Proverbs chapter 8, by me kings reign and lawgivers decree just things. In other words, because the state arises naturally from the social nature of man, it is therefore a product of nature and thereby established with God-given rights from the author of nature, which is God. And so whatever it commands, which is within its purview to command and is just, i.e. not contrary to the natural or revealed law, must be obeyed, and under the pain of conscience. These laws are binding on conscience because conscience, as we've said in previous episodes, is an act whereby we determine the moral character, at least in our eyes, of this thing we have done or are about to do. And a well-formed conscience will realize what we've said about the rights of the state, and thereby be guilty and feel guilty before God for disobedience to those laws. Again, if the law in question is just. Here again, it is good to quote Romans chapter 13, which bears on this topic specifically. St. Paul writes, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore he who resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment." Article 5, whether all are subject to the law. Some individuals are subject to certain individual laws which do not apply to others. Consider the difference between those laws which apply to minors, which do not apply to others, or laws which are more penalizing to adults as opposed to minors. There are also instances, like in the case of a strict monarchy, in which laws may be dispensed by the monarch as they concern himself, which would normally apply to everyone in general. However, even here, the monarch will have to answer to God for having or having not genuinely pursued the common good with his actions. There can also be laws which apply to citizens, which might not apply to foreigners residing within the state, or may apply to those states under the rule of another political body. Which reminds me of the following discussion between Peter and our Lord. This is from Matthew 17, where it is written, "Jesus spoke to him first, saying, 'What do you think, Simon? From whom do kings of the earth take toll or tribute? From their sons or from others?' And when he said from others, Jesus said to them, 'Then the sons are free. However, not to give offense to them, go to the sea, cast a hook. Take the first fish that comes up, and when you open its mouth, you will find a shekel. Take that and give it to them for me and for yourself.'" But in general, in response to our article, St. Thomas writes, the apostle writes, "Let every soul be subject to the higher powers." But subjection to a power seems to imply subjection to the laws framed by that power. Therefore, all men should be subject to human law. Article 6, whether he who is under a law may act beside the letter of the law. If an axe murderer is chasing you down the road, is it okay for you to cross the street where there is no designated crosswalk? Or if the speed limit on the highway is 65, but everyone is going 105, should you still go 65 miles an hour regardless? These are questions in which one can distinguish the spirit of the law against the letter of the law. The crosswalk and the speed limit, according to the spirit of the law, are for our safety and for the safety of society at large. And yet there may be certain circumstances in which the purpose of that law is accomplished better in a way different from the letter. Aquinas responds to this question with the following words and example. "Now it happens often that the observance of some point of law conduces to the common good in the majority of instances, and yet in some cases is very hurtful. For instance, suppose that in a besieged city it be an established law that the gates of the city are to be kept closed. This is good for public welfare as a general rule, but if it were to happen that the enemy are in pursuit of certain citizens who are defenders of the city, it would be a great loss to the city if the gates were not opened to them. And so in that case, the gates ought to be opened, contrary to the letter of the law, in order to maintain the common welfare, which the lawgiver had in view or had in mind." Which is pretty straightforward. And so with that, we move on to question 97 of change in laws. Article 1, whether human law should be changed in any way. And we should initially, I hope, as a knee-jerk reaction, take the response to this article to be in the negative, because just laws are, again, an ordinance of reason for the common good made by him who has care of the community and promulgated. And since natural law and eternal law are fixed, one might expect the laws or ordinances which flow from them or are in accord with them to also be fixed. But there are a couple reasons why this might not be the case, and human law would then need to undergo change. First of all would be if a man or his society as a whole has progressed in such a way that the law can be changed as to become more perfect. Consider how Jesus said that Moses, because of men's hardness of heart, permitted divorce, but that from the beginning this was not so. He's indicating that some laws are more perfect than others. A society may also diminish or become corrupted over time, and in this way need to loosen up its laws or risk incarcerating the majority of its citizens or inciting a revolution. As an example, and I am by no means defending these laws, but simply pointing out that they are the direct result of a degenerating generation. In Denver, marijuana used to be illegal. Now it's legal. Psychedelic mushrooms used to be illegal. Now those are legal too. Lastly, a society may also change its particular form of government, one which is better suited to the common good of its particular citizens. So, for example, if the citizens of a society are good, then maybe a democracy might benefit that society. But if the citizens are wicked, then it may end up choosing a less contingent upon citizens' moral compass type of government. In Aquinas' words, if the people have a sense of moderation and responsibility and are most careful guardians of the common good, it is right to enact a law allowing such a people to choose their own magistrates for the government of the commonwealth. But if, as time goes on, the same people become so corrupt as to sell their votes and entrust the government to scoundrels and criminals, then the right of appointing their public officials is rightly forfeit to such a people, and the choice devolves to a few good men. As the saying goes, in a democracy, you never get a better government than the one you deserve. Article 2, whether human law should always be changed whenever something better occurs. The key to this article is found in the following words from St. Thomas. Human law is rightly changed insofar as such change is conducive to the common good. But to a certain extent, the mere change of a law is of itself prejudicial to the common good. What that means is that if a law is perceived as just the way things are and always will be, then that law is more likely to be obeyed as being perceived as a certain immovable dictate of reason, and because in part it has stood the test of time, which means changing a law is itself something harmful to the common good by diluting this force of law. So even if a law can be upgraded in a certain area or time, it still shouldn't be changed unless it is really worth this collateral damage which will result from the change of the law itself. As St. Thomas puts it, when a law is changed, the binding power of the law is diminished, insofar as custom is abolished. Wherefore human law should never be changed unless, in some way or other, the common good be compensated according to the extent of the harm done in this respect. Article 3, whether custom can obtain force of law. Just like the will of the people or the will of the sovereign can be expressed in words spoken and written, they can also be expressed in deeds. Deeds or customs can obtain the force of law either in the sense that what was once just a custom, a way things are always done, can eventually become encoded in law, or customs of a place may actually have a binding force on the people by again showing a kind of consensus among the rulers and the people, which by tacitly endorsing this custom for so long by all can then be expected by all and held up as a law, which can be transgressed or obeyed. Here St. Thomas says, the people among whom a custom is introduced may be of two conditions, for if they are free and able to make their own laws, the consent of the whole people expressed by a custom counts far more in favor of a particular observance than does the authority of the sovereign, who has not the power to frame laws except as representing the people. If, however, the people have not the free power to make their own laws, or to establish a law made by a higher authority, nevertheless, with such a people a prevailing custom obtains force of law, insofar as it is tolerated by those to whom it belongs to make laws for that people, because by the very fact that they tolerate it, they seem to approve of that which is introduced by custom. Article 4, in our last article, whether the rulers of the people can dispense from human laws. Can the sovereign of a state pardon a man of some particular law or dispense him or her from observing this specific law or for a specific time. And not only can he, but in some cases he ought to, because he is the guardian of the common good, which may in some cases mean making an exception for some individual person. Yet, however, this exception must be granted exceptionally and prudently, and therefore is right not for all to have the right to do, but only the supreme ruler or rulers. Yet even here a warning is given by Aquinas, which is worth quoting and God willing observed, especially here in the States. St. Thomas writes, "If, however, he grant this permission without any such reason or of his mere will, he will be an unfaithful or an imprudent dispenser. Unfaithful if he has not the common good in view, imprudent if he ignores the reasons for granting dispensations." Which brings us to the close of another episode. We have just finished covering questions 96 and 97 of the Prima Secundae, that is, of the power of human law and of change in laws. My name is Austin Habish with Think Catholic, and I cannot wait to see you tomorrow.